Hello, and thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Reverend JR, and today I want to deliver to you a public service announcement on the hazards you can face while driving in winter conditions and rural areas. So sit back, relax, and be educated. The first and most important thing to do when driving in weather that is less than optimal, or in any area you may be unfamiliar with, is to always watch for slow-moving or otherwise different traffic to what you might be used to. Not everything on the road is a car, and if you should happen to approach something that moves slower than you on a hill, be sure not to pass it until you know that it is absolutely safe to do so. Remember, only you are responsible for your safety. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the thing in front of me here is an Amish buggy, which is drawn by a horse. But it's also very common, as you might see in a bit, to encounter things like tractors, bicycles, pedestrians, or even semis that simply cannot take the hills at the same speed as your car or truck can. Similarly, as we'll also see, you need to be aware of the conditions of the road at all times. So here, for example, we have a section of road which demonstrates this wonderfully. As you can see, we go along and the road becomes more snow-covered due to more accumulation, as well as the drifting snow, which comes across from the empty fields and is more prevalent on the tops of hills where the winds are higher and the roads tend to be colder. Again, you always want to pack for these kinds of conditions. It's a good idea to keep a blanket in your car in case your car fails for some reason. It's also a good idea to have a jack and a spare tire, because you never know when you'll catch a small piece of ice, or a nail in the road, or a piece of something that's come off of a truck, or some other vehicle on the road. It only takes one shattered piece of glass to slow you down for half an hour, after all. And again, when driving in conditions you are not familiar with, or in weather that is inclement, or just any time in general, always drive at a safe speed for the road. This does not mean doing the speed limit all the time. Sometimes you must slow down to operate your vehicle safely. As you can see here, you might have a hard time distinguishing what's ahead until you're much closer to it. And if you get too close and there happens to be ice or something, you're going to have a very hard time avoiding a collision, and it will be your fault as a failure to control. But it doesn't really matter whose fault it is, because you're still going to have a very bad day if you wreck from driving unsafely. Here's some more footage that demonstrates just how quickly the conditions of the road can change, and why you need to be ever present when you are in command of a car. Remember, when you're behind the wheel, you're controlling 2 tons of metal that can kill yourself or others if you are not careful. The snow is indeed very pretty, but that's no reason to take your eyes off of the road and watch it instead. So here we have, for example, an instance where you just have to be aware of what people are doing. Because we have a truck who is moving slow for no apparent reason, and another truck following him. And the first truck decides he's just going to slow down with apparently no signal, and he pulls off to the side, but he doesn't actually stop, which is dangerous by itself. The correct thing to do is pull off and let traffic pass you if you are going to go slower. However, not using a turn signal does mean that it's your fault if someone rear-ends you after you decide to slow down for no good reason. But either way, you don't really want to be a part of that, and that's why it's best to always drive defensively, because you never know when the person 3 cars ahead of you is going to be crazy. And here we have another perfect example of the sort of thing you should pay attention to. When you're going around curves and you have the potential for black ice or wet roads or perhaps leaves or grass or other things on the roadway that make them less than optimal, you always want to treat those corners with caution. Now, the highway engineers will get a lot of flack for having to build such high embankments on corners, for having to put such low numbers on the signs, because they know you're probably going to ignore all of that in an effort to try to get where you're going 2 minutes faster. But the highway engineer does not want you to become a statistic. And the highway engineer knows that you don't really care if there's black ice or if the road is wet versus dry. So the engineer gets a lot of flack for being overly safe, even though the average person will not obey his regulations anyway, and will do things differently from what is recommended, even though he's only trying to keep you safe. Civil engineering is hard, and breaking the rules of the road makes it considerably harder. For example, even when the driving conditions are optimal and people have good visibility, people will still ignore those signs the engineers put up, like the ones that recommend stopping and looking both directions and using turn signals, because people seem to forget that they are driving a weapon if it is not used properly. Another thing you absolutely want to pay attention for is wildlife. For example, I'm driving, and my friend is also paying attention, and he says to me,
"Watch that deer."
I've been very fortunate that this is about the closest I've come to hitting a deer in a long time. But those things can wreck your car, and if you hit them wrong, they can wreck you inside of your car. And I'll tell you right now, deer, dogs, cats, possums, raccoons, all manner of wildlife doesn't really care that your car is there. Doesn't care how bright your headlights are. Doesn't care about your turn signal. Certainly doesn't care about your horn. I'm just lucky that one was as far away as it was before it jumped out in front of us. And that's going to pretty much wrap up this winter and rural driving PSA. If you enjoyed that, click the thumbs up, leave a comment. You know what to do. Share it, like, subscribe, whatever. And as always, this has been Reverend JR, showing you more dashcam footage, reminding you to drive safely, and signing off.